So that was Mickey McConnell with a lovely song, and I think we might persuade him for another one before the end of today. So now I'm going to take up my famous bell again, ding, 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 and I'm going to call on Gabriel. So Gabriel Fitzmaurice is deeply rooted in the literary tradition of North Kerry. He is a poet, broadcaster, writer, translator, singer, and raconteur. He was born in 1952 in the village of Moyvane, County Kerry, where he still lives. But for more than 3 decades, he taught and later served as principal at his local national school. He is now happily retired and singing songs for us and telling stories and doing all sorts. He has been called Poetry's Answers to John B. Keane in Books of Ireland, and his poems have been described as comparable to Burns for their insight and lyricism. He is the author of more than 40 books, including collections of poetry in English and Irish, as well as several collections of verse for children. And I had the great honour of meeting him last year, but that's another story. So, Gabriel, can you say hello to us so that we know where you are?
Hello, folks. How are you all? Great to be here. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I think that that's excessive. I am inclined to introduce myself now as an ex-poet, a failed musician, and a sometime school teacher. So that's it.
Well, it's out of your hands.
I read your poem. Many years ago, my father, about 22 years ago, my father died very suddenly. My father had Jack Fitzmaurice lived in my van all his life, and he ran a shop with my mother, a little grocery shop. My mother died in 1974. My father continued, and one morning he got up and put on tea for his breakfast and an egg for his breakfast. He rang us at home to say he thought he was having a heart attack, and we got down, and he was on the floor, dying in the total command of his senses. And the bishop was in town that day. That's why we were off school. It was confirmation day, so I got down to the church to say I wouldn't be playing for the choir. So my father was anointed, and afterwards the bishop came up. But anyway, he died very quickly and very easily. A great way to go. Not very easy for the people after who were left in shock, but a great way to go when you're in your middle 80s. But John, our son, was 9 years of age at the time, and he was devastated. And for weeks afterwards, he was going around moaning and, unagoning about the grandfather. So I said, John, why don't you write about your grandfather or talk about your grandfather? Believe me, writing is therapeutic. It will help to get it off your mind. So John said, no, he was too sad to write, but he would talk into a tape recorder. So he spoke into a tape recorder about the grandfather, and he kept the tape. So sometime later, some weeks later, Radio Kerry, our local radio station, ran a competition for children to write about their best friend. And John said to me, he said, Dad, he said, Granddad was my best friend. So I said, look, if you want to enter for the competition, give me the tape. I'll type it up in the computer for you. You edit and all the rest, subtract and add to it, and the best of luck to you. So he sent it in, and he won. Now, when I say he won, it's a Kerry winner. There were 5 winners. There was one for a Monday, a Tuesday, a Wednesday, a Thursday, and a Friday. But on one of the days, anyway, he got back to record his story for Radio Kerry, and he got all his prizes, and, he was delighted with himself. So I was very impressed by his story. So I said, John, do you mind if I make a poem out of your story? And John, being a cute Kerry man, said, how much will you give me? So I said, I'll give you £50. It was in the old money when the book appears. So I did. And this is my version of John's story called My Best Friend. My best friend was Grandad. I used to stay at his house on Friday nights, and that was great fun. He used to take me to the chipper after the 9 o'clock news, and he'd buy 2 cartons of curry chips and 2 sausages, and we'd eat them in his kitchen during the late show. He used to come up to our house on Sundays for dinner, and I'd always want to sit beside him at the table. I remember one Christmas, I had just got a snooker table. Grandad came up for Christmas dinner, and I had asked everybody else to play with me. They all said no, they were too busy. Grandad was in the middle of setting the table, and I asked him to play, and he said he would. He came over, and I actually had to place the balls for him. It was so long since he had played snooker. Well, Grandad was my best friend. He was so kind. He was just unique to me, like he didn't know much Irish, because when he was young he hadn't much time for school. He had to help at home on the farm, he said, and at 14 years he had to hide himself with farmers because he had 13 brothers and sisters and times were bad. But I often did my Irish homework with him, and he always ended up right. I remember the day Grandad died. It was March. I can't remember the date. He rang Mum and said he thought he was having a heart attack. We rushed down to his house. We got there in 2.5 minutes, and when we went in, we found Grandad lying on the floor moaning. And then he just died. And I was below in the room crying, and then Mum and Nessa and Dad started crying too. At the funeral parlour, I forgot myself and said, I'm sitting beside Grandad. But Grandad was in his coffin. He was dead. It was fine until they closed the coffin, and then I knew I'd never see him again in this life. Goodbye, Grandad, my best friend. Goodbye. Goodbye.
Oh, oh wow, what a beautiful telling. That was just gorgeous. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
To put us onto the big screen so we can show our appreciation. Oh, yeah, that was lovely. That got me in the heart.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, that was lovely. Thank you so much. I'm just